We're in agreement? So this is our, what is this, the 29th or the 28th? The 28th. This is our September Accessibility Commission meeting. And our first order on the agenda is welcome and announcement. Kind of welcome you guys. I don't have any announcements. Do you have any announcements? Anybody else have any announcements? Okay. Moving on to item number 2. We're going to approve the minutes from our previous meeting. So if you've all seen that, we can have like a motion to approve that. Yep. All right. Cool. All right. Moving right along. So, okay, this one's my section, I guess. So, I did write those bylaws. I overlooked them with, or I looked them over with Christy. They look pretty good. I don't know if, did they get sent out? I don't know if she sent them out or not.
They should have been in the email with the agenda.
Yeah, I kept them. Some of the bylaws I looked over were super dense, super long. So I kind of kept them a little more bare bones just to keep it pretty straightforward. And I felt like a lot of the language was pretty superfluous in a lot of those other ones. So if you guys are in agreement to move forward with them for the time being, it's not like we can't also vote to change them at some point down the line.
I just have a question.
Sure.
Do we have the full responsibility for approving these bylaws, or does it need to be reviewed by any other either level of our organization or the town, or by another body?
Yeah, so Christy was going to be able to speak on that because she had been reaching out to some people, but did you have any information on that?
Yes, so I actually, in reaching out, found out, I guess it would be good, or depending how you look at it, news, in the sense that, so based on what was in our proposed bylaws, when I passed those on to Jen Breaker, just to see like where we're at and what that means, she actually said that a lot of the information that exists in the bylaws are also intended to be included in a committee handbook that's actually is in the process of development. And for that reason, she was saying they are hoping to direct committees to the handbook rather than particular bylaws for every individual committee. Yeah, so that was like a big update that I learned about today, actually. So what that means is a lot of that information will exist just elsewhere. That also means that in lieu of bylaws, with the work that you've already put into it, it might be even better to transition the work that you have done into broadening. So we have our like mission or like our charge, but if we want to use that information to dictate the scope of what the work would be in a more specific way, I was told that that's probably a better way of structuring the committee, because that handbook is it's drafted and is ideally coming out in the spring. Fingers crossed. So that is an update that I got just today about where we're at with that. Is that something that works for folks? Do we think that honors the work? I want to make sure the work you've already done is honored as well.
Meaning that what's in this handbook will be the bylaws, sort of an umbrella set of bylaws.
Mm-hmm. For
so,
every. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, a lot of the language, like I said, that you put in there exists in the draft as it is. So. I
mean, I didn't like write them from scratch or anything. I'm not going to act devastated. It's totally
so
fine.
Wrote the handbook. Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I had about bylaws, but I guess that doesn't really apply now. But
thank you, Jamie.
Is there interest based on what folks saw, like that was written? Is there a discussion to be had now about how to turn that into a scope, or is it? Well, I'm now looking at Christy since she just arrived, but is there interest in having that discussion now, or kind of circling back offline?
So, sorry, I guess, did you mean like we would kind of tailor them just to live on our page on the website.
If there's anything in there that you think is specific to this committee.
I mean, I kind of just built the bylaws around our mission statement. So I think everything in there was pretty much pulled from there in some way, outside of just the really, dry kind of stuff that's probably in the handbook. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I don't know if anything stuck out to any of you.
I seem, most of it seems,
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward. I think.
Bylaws before, so, I think
when I think scope, I think something maybe that's a little bit different, which is where does our commission focus? I feel like we have very wide and very valuable foci, but they're very broad. And so-
Yeah.
So that's what I think of when I hear that terminology, but I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant, Jasmine, when you were talking about thinking about our scope. If we were trying to sort of more clearly define or narrow the scope of this commission, or if it was really more just about tailoring the bylaws for our page.
The first, the former.
Okay. That to me is a really important discussion, but I have to admit I feel a little bit lost, I guess, or not sure on how to focus, because I feel like we have a lot of really great ideas that are broad.
So I'll say my original thought when I was like, oh no, we need to back up and start and think about what we're doing was a strategic plan, not necessarily, not necessarily like other organizations do them, but rather kind of giving okay, so here are the things that are in our mission statement, the things that we want to work on, but here are our priorities and what we hope to get done this year. So, I mean, we could kind of take all the stuff that we talked about over the last few months, the work that you've done on the bylaws, and kind of pull it together into okay, this is what we do, and this is what we hope to get done, kind of statement.
Yeah, it's kind of like distill it into like a set of goals,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anything we could necessarily pull from the bylaws that would be that useful with that. I mean, I guess the one thing that I would want to carry over from the bylaws into anything is the thought that we were going to be able to potentially pull some funding from the handicap parking.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Still working on that. I realized I didn't send you the thing from the Mouse Center Mission Facility, but did it come up in your meeting?
One of the things, I mean, even to that end, again, the conversation returned to that, the focus for us should be to outline what our budgets or costs associated with our commission would be before we pursue how to,
Okay.
like what money, where the money's coming from, basically.
Did they have a preference on how we are to present that?
No, but I can, we can talk offline about, like, I can give you kind of the background of what HRIC is working on right
Okay.
now, which was rather informal.
Yeah. Because I have a draft, which is here, my lovely little notebook, that I can always make pretty.
Yeah, I think that would be a good starting point. And if for the rest of you, because I know we've kind of talked about different costs, like one being the voter booth, others like the educational events and things like that. So if there are other things you can think of that are costly, right? I would definitely send those to Christy to add to the list. Because what we can do, depending on what your list consists of, is be like, okay, so we were thinking 2 events a year. We also want to make sure we buy 2 voter booths. We know exactly like what those costs are. We've talked about a couple consultants, and there were some costs around there. So it's like a broad sketch of things.
But yeah, as far as the scope objects, I mean, is there anything any of you want to kind of throw out there that we could include in that? I mean, I think for me, a lot of it has just been very like visible, physical stuff. Like I kind of just wanted to do that just to make our presence a little more apparent to the town as a whole. Granted, you know, those things are expensive, so we put out that, that application for the grant. And that would lead to someone coming by to kind of give us some ideas about our accessibility plan. But I know that was a big thing for us, was building like an accessibility plan.
Which is what I have kind of in the consultant realm too for.
Right,
that
yeah.
is like, that's, hiring somebody to come in and do that is gonna be a significant cost. I haven't yet been able to get from other communities how much they spent. That's still an outstanding question. But I kind of guessed based on what I've done in my own job, so.
Yeah, I have like zero experience with that, so I wouldn't even know, but.
It's like, yes, and then make it $1,000 more. That's basically.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of how I treat a lot of things.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask, but.
No, please, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna ask if anyone else had any more thoughts.
Well, when I think about the accessibility plan, I have to admit, I'm kind of confused as to why our commission needs to be doing it, because I feel like these things should be covered under the ADA when it comes to construction of buildings after a certain date. So is this an example of where we should perhaps be reaching out to the buildings department or something like that to find out if maybe their budget already covers these things, or, you know, because this would be a significant
Right.
line item for our budget.
Right.
But it seems like it should be covered, and this actually came up in my interview for this commission, that this would probably not be a huge role for us, if that was covered. That we would be looking at subsets of
Yeah.
our population here in the town and how we could identify, these were things that came up, I know, in earlier meetings, mental health,
Right.
gender identity, women, children, people of minorities, how do we make them feel more welcome in our community? And I agree that the more visible way is to do what we've already done, and I think there's so much value in that, but at the same time, I wonder if we're duplicating services that maybe are not being done but should be.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're learning definitely along the way who's supposed to be doing what.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's worked out so far with us telling people these things, but it seems like they don't even know unless we're telling them.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard to gauge that. I mean, I want to expand the purview to all of these things. It's you know, we're still kind of like learning who we talk to get some of these things done and stuff like that. But like, you know, going back to that grant thing, like that was interesting because I mostly just saw that as a vehicle to get the accessible pedestrian signals in. I wasn't really thinking beyond that, and then it kind of grew beyond that. But it's not like that won't be useful to the town as a whole anyway. And I think the town government's involved in this at this point too, because they helped us draft that grant and sent it themselves. But I mean, outside of those physical things, I don't know if you guys have any more concrete ideas about expanding stuff or.
To your point, Fawn, I think part of what we're able to do is by asking the questions, is kind of highlighting, oh, actually, that's not you, that's this other department. And so we continue to kind of ask the questions about, do we have an accessibility plan? Where would it live? That hopefully we can start pulling those people together to have a meeting. Because when we were working on the grant in the spring, the answer was, oh, we didn't know we didn't have one. So I think that part of it is institutional knowledge, part of it is, especially with the ADA, there's a lot of reactionary movement. So municipalities wait until there's a complaint to do something rather than being proactive about it. And so for a lot of places, they've been away with that because it hasn't been an issue for them. And so I see us as the people who can kind of nudge to be more proactive before there's an issue, or before they're renovating the library or renovating town hall, so that that's all thought about.
Makes sense. But when it comes to coming up with the
Right.
accessibility plan,
Yeah.
where would the funding,
I don't know.
where should it come from? Does it matter?
That
Does
will
it matter
ultimately
Well, wasn't that
dynamics,
covered by the
you know.
grant?
So that consultant, I don't think would be writing the whole accessibility plan. I
Oh,
think they're
okay.
just looking at the accessibility of our downtown, because it's the Massachusetts Downtown Grant. They only care about the square. So it's not thinking about all the buildings in the town. And so, like, I have an example of Topsfields, which they really, like, list every single building that the town owns and where it stands on accessibility, plus kind of a 10-year plan for where they wanted to go with things. That's the type of thing I would have expected to find. Thank you. Trying to
No, I'm just
Um,
realizing it's been talking about.
trying, you know, but again, many communities don't have it. So.
If I can make a recommendation, I suggest, I'm thinking of two separate lists and we see how they overlap. One about what questions that you might have, so that would be questions such as like, do we have an ADA plan? Where would it live? Where does it live? Like who's doing that work? That's a lot of questions, but like all in the same vein. Another would be, what is the scope of the grant, and like the funding and even just an update. The other list is like what particular departments do you think are affiliated with this work and that you'd like to invite to our meetings to ask some of these questions. And then I can see where those two lists overlap and we can begin to prioritize that. And I don't want you all to feel pressured to like have the scope before you meet with these groups or these departments. It might be helpful to see what they offer, what's already built into their budget and so on, before we start thinking about that we have to do anything more than we really have to. Because I've definitely heard interest and when I'm in meetings and this comes up, there is interest and I hear like, oh, this group is doing some kind of accessibility plan, but it might not be the same as the kind of plan we're talking about. And so I think if we start connecting some of those dots and you all tell me like who you want to prioritize in meeting with like first, then we can schedule from now to December, inviting those folks to these meetings, especially that you meet at 6 on a Thursday. There's going to be a lot of people who want to pass that last hour, and they're all like upstairs. So that's my proposal for that.
That sounds awesome. I took notes. We can start looking at the.
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely help us build a framework, I think, and at least kind of have an idea. Because, yeah, it makes sense not to just, like, redo things that are already done. But I do like the idea of us kind of serving as this glue, not glue, like almost like a telephone system that connects all these things together. But I guess we kind of have to learn the system before we can create those connections. I forget what I was going to add, but anything else on the bylaws for now, or set to move on? Maybe it'll come back to me. I'll remember later. Okay, so next up is the human library update.
Yes, so thank you to Christie. I was given a few local libraries, basically, out of schools and things like that, that have offered human library in the past. And I reached out to all of them. I heard back from one, but there was good information online, actually, about several. So I spoke with someone at the Barnstable Library, and she had some good tips, and one of them had to do with something that I guess when you do sign on with the human library, they do a lot of training with you. But she said the most difficult part of the process was choosing your books, meaning the people that are being interviewed, and that there's a lot of education that the human library does about choosing from these 15 pillars of prejudice, but choosing selectively so that you have a very complementary group of books, and that they sort of guide you in that. But that's the most difficult part. And it's interesting, some of the programs have done very private interviewing type of setups. They actually set up a tent and did it outside and had people, had the books sitting at tables, very close proximity to each other, no expectation of privacy, with the exception of, I believe there was a survivor who had been survivor of domestic abuse, and there were still some safety issues, so they had that book in she also raised what I thought was an interesting thing. I know that when I started to look at this, I couldn't go too far into the investigative process to figure out cost without having to sort of sign us up and start filling out forms and things like that. But it seemed like it was gonna be over $200 just to sign on with the Human Library, which is in Denmark.
Yeah, that's what I thought when I looked into it too.
But she mentioned, and another site had mentioned this too, Boston Latin, that because they did it through, Boston Latin did it as a school, and in Barnstable they did it through their library,
Right.
they were able to qualify for a membership fee that was only $49. So that, to me, you know, we can't move too much further forward on this, I think, at this point, but in terms of our planning, it seems to me it might make sense to reach out to our library, or maybe to our schools, or perhaps both, but I think probably one or the other, and see if there's a way that we can partner with them so that they can be applying for the Human Library membership. It would decrease the costs significantly. I love the idea of having the schools involved. I think our library does a tremendous amount already. And I think that people who go to the library are aware of a lot of those programs, but maybe the schools would be a good thing to pursue. And they got the students involved.
Yes, at the Latin,
Yeah.
that's a Latin one or whatever,
Yeah, exactly. That was really interesting to do. You're not, and there's a lot of regulation. You're not allowed to offer any kind of incentive. You're not allowed to ask for people to do things. You have to, it has to be all volunteers for the books. You can provide snacks, and that's it. But it sounds interesting. They also said that some of the challenge is that it takes a long time to set up because of the time difference, so that you're dealing with people in Denmark with a time change
right,
in
right.
terms of getting questions responded to and decisions made.
Yeah, they're
May
probably like
take a
7
while.
hours ahead or something.
Yeah, something like that. So she said allow a minimum of 3 to 4 months from application to when you want to actually have your JFA happen.
And I'll say the girl at the library, because I emailed them, and she was the one that told me that you can do this independently of them, it doesn't have to go through them, but I don't know if that's, I don't,
Not a single
Yeah.
one of
I
these
know.
seems to be non-official.
right, I'm not
Yeah.
disagreeing with you, but that is
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
that's not the information I was
Right,
given.
yeah.
So it kind of, I did reach out to the library, and it did kind of, feels like, I know Shilbrook, I don't know what her role was at the library, but she was very interested in doing it.
Yeah, I spoke to at least one other person at the library as well who was interested.
Yeah.
So they at least know about it.
Yeah. Right.
But I guess I want to pose this question: what's really what are we benefiting from by doing it through the Human Library versus like you were just bringing up versus just on our own? Like, do they do some of the marketing or promotion? Do they?
There's a tremendous amount of training, which is also a
Yes.
piece of the 3 to 4 month
True.
time frame. That from this librarian Cindy, from her perspective, was critical. And it's online training, so people can do it at their own convenience, but it trains them about their only very specific things they're allowed to talk about. And I know that sounds sort of limiting,
Oh,
but it
okay.
had to do, maybe Dave is wrong, it had to do with what they said about themselves, preparing things to say about themselves as an initial statement. And then it was definitely intended to be an open dialogue, but there was structure imposed to, I think, sort of protect everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we wouldn't have access to that if we didn't go through the library. I also feel personally, and I think there's much more research I could do about this, but I would not really know how to go about this in a way that helped me feel confident that I was protecting all the books that were volunteering to do this, and also the selection. I thought that was really interesting what she said about, not having just the pillars of prejudice that we may first think of, but having a very well-balanced group, because she said you want to know your community, and you want to
True.
think about what are the hot button issues in your community, you may want to avoid those, to make it more of a learning experience as opposed to something that may attract people who are just looking to cause problems as opposed to learn. So again, I'm not saying we need to do it the way she outlined it, but there was so much that she said that was thought-provoking that I think she was given as training through the Human Library that it made me feel like it was probably worth, especially if it's $49.
Yeah, it's not an exorbitant price where I would expect them to be trying to sell us.
If it was 200, I mean, honestly, I'd be fine with that.
Even then, like anywhere, even under like 1,000, I think it's still them. you know, it doesn't sound like they're trying to sell us on it, so it sounds more, you
No,
know.
I think it's more just, looking for training, having somebody at someone's time,
Right.
I guess just out of curiosity, was there any training that you put forth before the race talks and stuff, or?
No, but that's because that was not a, I wouldn't even consider those a facilitated conversation. That was literally us dipping our toe in the water to see if there was appetite for the conversation. If we wanted to potentially do this without human library, the training that it would require, it would be a lot. I say that more like it'd be a lot probably on me. But we also could potentially leverage our partnership with the Heathmere Center for Cultural Engagement. But again, like if this is covered in the cost of what they're offering,
I mean, it seems
for
like
bandwidth and capacity, it would make sense
Yeah.
to go. And that is, even if, like, whether it's 50 or 200, not only is that like cost effective, like for the schools, but that, like, I could see there's plenty of different parties involved that could cover that cost, like 200 out of
Oh,
even
right.
my
Yeah.
budget line and stuff.
Well,
For them to do all that labor that I wouldn't have capacity for, happily.
And I also think about it from an intellectual property standpoint, that, they're the organization that came up with this idea,
Right.
and I want to honor that, and.
No bootleg human library?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, and I, like I said, when I
Yeah.
started looking at it, I was fine, but then it seemed like there was a little bit of pushback about that, I'm just like, well, it seems like, it seems like it'd be better.
But that
to
also might
go with
be
that.
a reason why we should ask the schools to be kind of our lead
Yes.
organization. I actually met Dan Bauer at the Celebration on Saturday and mentioned that I wanted to set up a meeting with him. He's like, yeah, sure, do it. So I could bring this up
Yeah.
as a, like, this is something that we're thinking about, and
Right.
like, yeah.
She also mentioned something, and again, I have kind of hit a wall when I go to the Human Library's site in terms of clarifying that this would apply to us, but she seems to be suggesting that because they have had, I think she said 3 to 5 of these Human Library events in Barnstable, that they now pay a lower rate each time they offer it. So it may have been that they paid more upfront, even though they were a library. I'm not sure, but I know Boston Latin only paid $49 to set up their program as a school, and I think that was the first time they offered it.
But Jeff, and I know you had said, I'm just remembering when we was talking about that, you have like 15, but you said you didn't recommend that, like for the first time if we were doing something like that we should have.
Oh,
us-
in terms of having 15 books?
Yes.
Yeah, no.
She recommended 8 to 12.
Yeah,
max.
that's what Jess was saying, yeah, especially if it's like the
lot.
first time we
It's
do
a
it, we
lot.
shouldn't be.
We need monitors, they
Yeah.
all have to be
Yeah.
volunteers,
Yeah.
there needs all incentivization.
Right.
It takes a lot to coordinate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just think
So-
you as one person going through 15 heavy stories.
Right, I think it'd be a
I'm
lot.
tired thinking of
Yeah.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
Yeah,
doing
definitely.
some more work on it, cause I kind of, JD and I talked and I kind of dropped the ball on it, so I'm glad we.
No, we share effort, just pass it on.
Yeah.
So can we just, so sort of, if you don't mind, just to take that to the next step, so if I understand correctly, you might be meeting with Dan? Would you like me to invite you? Sure. Or,
Yeah, sure, I'll come.
Oh, wait, can't do 3.
Oh, it's
Okay.
okay, fine, if you can do it, you go, because you're,
Okay.
you've invested
We'll see what
some more.
time else the
Sure.
work schedules are.
Yeah.
I'll reach out to them and see what he has.
that'd be great, thank you.
No, I think, I think it's a great thing, and I think a lot of people have done it for it, and I have no problem, being trained on it, I think it makes sense if we're gonna do something like this, it is a touchy subject, but you're dealing with a lot of personal, personal stories, and you do have
Yeah.
to be careful that, because I know JD has expressed the interest in, being involved.
Yeah, I mean, something like that, for me, I mean, I can only speak for myself, it's like kind of exciting, but
Right.
I know that's not necessarily the case for everyone, especially considering some of the categories.
Yeah.
But if that's it for Human Library, we can move on to the Jasmine's report out.
Yep, so I'll be brief so we can.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
What's up,
I
Jody?
just don't really know how to jump in. But, well, because I think I kind of missed the first meeting where, like, maybe the Human Library was brought the idea is like cultural, like education, engagement, and passion thing is kind of like the goal of the human library. And then there's probably other ways of doing that.
Empathy building
Yeah.
for people with different experiences than you.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we revisit that?
Yeah,
I'm just
can we
keeping
get
track of
just a
time.
time?
I don't
Yeah,
want to
no,
lose
I
that
know.
idea.
If you have some
Um,
ideas, if you wanna email me, and then we can bring that into our meeting for next month. Yeah,
And if
or
it's
we can
helpful to
check.
connect with like Lauren or Fawn, you
Right.
can do that on your own time, like if between, as long as it's like not more than two, basically.
Yeah.
You can also
Right.
strategize more
Okay.
with that. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But that'd be another way to explore that, because it was a conversation at one point too. It was like, are we doing this just about
Yeah.
sharing different ability
Right.
experiences, or is it about all of them? So we have been going back and forth about
Yeah,
that.
and just,
So
this
I'm
is
there
a
right
side note from this, but Karen was in a meeting that about 5 of us had at our house, and there was another idea that had come that we had talked about, so it's, there are other things we can actually, so.
That's a good point.
But it's a good point, yeah.
So I'm gonna zip through this, but I just want to thank the commission for coming out to Celebración, the Latinx Heritage Month celebration on Saturday. I liked the little trivia that you all had, and just the unwavering support I've gotten from this committee for other endeavors outside of this committee is, I see it, and I appreciate it a lot. I sent in an email the October training proposal with Heathmere, so that Center for Cultural Engagement. They proposed Thursday, October 26th, which I believe is when our next meeting was, to host a dialogue and education training, which would be the next step for what we're about to do tonight. They did this for the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. It was very good. I think what will even work better for us, because we're a smaller committee, like one of the components that took the longest with HRIC was that they were reflecting on like past committee behavior and kind of unpacking some of their communication challenges there. Us being new, we haven't really gotten into too much of that just yet, though there are some things we can work out, I'm sure. So basically it's about talking, sharing the difference between like structured dialogue versus debate, deliberation, and discussion, creating those community agreements for us for moving forward, and talking about like being activated and things like that, and then we practice that, doing that in small groups. And then she would come up with questions, her and I can tailor more specifically to this committee and its experiences, to go through that. The cost would be $750, which that comes out of my budget, because you are a committee of mine, and that's under the training and consulting piece. So I'm not sure if that's something that we want to put to a vote.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, do we want to put this to a vote? Because,
Can I make a recommendation?
absolutely.
That we not have a meeting in October, but just do the training, because I worry that this says 2 hours, and having a meeting and then 2 hours of training seems like a lot for everybody, especially somebody who's worked all day.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, do you all want to vote on whether or not we move forward with the training instead of the meeting?
Make a motion that we vote to cancel our October meeting in lieu of training.
All in favor? Aye. Cool. We're in agreement.
Okay. October is also National Disability Employment Awareness Month, so I just wanted to let you know the Massachusetts Commission on Diversity, they're doing workshops and things for employees, and I'm intending to attend one session called About Us and With Us, and another one called, I'm thinking and/or right now, Opening Doors to Employment for Persons with Disabilities. So I'm just naming that so you'll know that's what I'm doing, so that you can hold me accountable for that and ask me how that went. The next thing I wanted to promote is continuing on with like the Latinx Heritage Month celebration, and also even Jody, I know you mentioned like Art Association comings and goings on the November 3rd and 4th. they're actually doing a Dia de los Muertos event, which is the Day of the Dead. It's not Halloween, but it's a holiday that celebrates in a lot of, specifically the one that we know is popularized out of Mexico, but it is celebrated in Haiti and other Central and South American countries to honor the dead, celebrate their lives. And they're doing the skull designing, and there's gonna be an exhibit and everything, so just more opportunities for cultural exposure. The last piece I wanted to point out, which I think will be of interest to many of you, I met with DCAT earlier this week, shout out to DCAT, we're talking about the potentials for programming, and I know we've had the discussion in the past about where do we go, how do we share with the community some of these smaller wins, and like when JD is on it and gets that poll moved and we have a picture of it, what do we do with it? And so I wanted to propose to you all, if you're interested, which you don't even need me for, DCAT is always looking for just content. So if there's something that you wanted to do, like a DAC wins of the week or something, or the monthly wins, or whatever it is, and you could do a quick 5-minute community update on camera about what we accomplished, and they'll show the graphics of the pictures. Not only is that a way to show those low-hanging fruits that we're grabbing, but also to promote the committee itself. So I give you all that. Do with it what you will, but they've been great partners, and they do, like all their promotions are circulated like on YouTube. Smaller segments typically end up on Facebook as well, so just options for that.
I like that just for having the video proof of that essentially, because then we could embed that on our page, on our website, you know, and we could have like the, you know, the wins, and people could at least see like examples of stuff we've done. We could also, that could also be a vehicle for us presenting some of our ideas to the community. I mean, I don't know what kind of viewership they have, but it's at least something, you know.
The viewership doesn't just come from the people who watch it live. It also is helpful, like when it does get to social media.
Right.
That's kind of where I see more of the views. Also, like my parents saw it from New York because I set up their smart TV.
There you
My
go,
YouTube
yeah.
algorithm. So if you have family in other states and you set up their smart TVs, they'll get it. And then a good tool to share, like say we have positions that open and we want to recruit people, and we're like, hey, learn more about the commission here.
Yeah, I like the idea of that. I think it's one of those things that, you know, we're still kind of working on, like some of our things going forward for some of the other content we produce with them, but I think the wins one would be an easy one for us.
Christy has Greg's contact.
My family could right now, so.
Cool. So is that it for the report out? Okay, so on to new business. Any new business to be presented? I guess I just have one question is, have we received anything at all since those forms have been put up on our page for the incident reports?
Oh, no, nothing new to report
Okay.
from the incidents.
Okay, cool. So do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Okay, meeting adjourned. Oh, wait.
Vote first.
Oh, I also vote to adjourn the meeting.
Good job.
All right, meeting adjourned.